The autumn wind blew crisp and cool as Isabella Montgomery stepped out of her sleek black car. Her driver closed the door behind her with a gentle click. At 42 years old, Isabella had everything money could buy: a penthouse apartment overlooking the city, a thriving real estate company, and a wardrobe filled with designer clothes. Today, she wore a tailored burgundy coat that matched her lipstick perfectly. Isabella checked her diamond watch. She had 30 minutes before her meeting with potential investors, just enough time to grab coffee from her favorite cafe 2 blocks away. As she walked down the busy street, her high heels clicking against the pavement, Isabella barely noticed the people around her. Her mind was filled with numbers, projections, and plans for her next big development project. The homeless people that dotted the sidewalks were usually just blurs in her peripheral vision, sad reminders of a world she had worked hard to rise above. But something made her slow down as she passed a small family huddled on a tattered blanket near the entrance to the park. Perhaps it was the soft melody being hummed by the man, or the way the 2 small children nestled against him despite the coolness of the day. The man sat with his legs stretched awkwardly in front of him. Even to an untrained eye, it was clear he had some kind of disability. A worn metal crutch lay beside him, and his right leg was noticeably thinner than his left. A cardboard sign propped against a small cup read, "Any help appreciated. God bless." Isabella would have walked past, maybe dropping a few dollars as she often did without really looking, but the song the man hummed stopped her in her tracks. It was an old tune, one she hadn't heard in 20 years, a melody written just for her by someone she had tried very hard to forget. She turned slowly, her heart suddenly pounding in her chest. The man's face was hidden behind a scraggly beard. His clothes were worn and dirty. When he looked up, sensing someone watching him, Isabella felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Those eyes. She would know them anywhere. Deep brown with flecks of gold, like sunlight through whiskey. Michael? The name left her lips as barely a whisper. The man squinted up at her, confusion crossing his weathered face. Then, as recognition dawned, his eyes widened in shock. "Isabella? Is that really you?" The little girl beside him, no more than 6 years old, tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, who is this lady?" Isabella couldn't breathe. Michael Hayes, her first love, her greatest heartbreak, was sitting on the street corner with 2 small children, clearly homeless and in dire need. 20 years ago, he had been a handsome music student with dreams of becoming a famous composer. His talented fingers could coax magic from piano keys, and his smile had once been the center of Isabella's world. Now, that same smile appeared, hesitant and broken, revealing a missing tooth. "It's been a long time," Michael said softly, attempting to straighten his posture with obvious difficulty. Isabella's phone buzzed in her pocket, probably her assistant reminding her about the meeting. But for the first time in years, work was the furthest thing from her mind. "What happened to you?" she asked, her designer purse suddenly feeling heavy on her arm as she clutched it like a shield. Michael glanced at his children and back at Isabella, his eyes filled with a mixture of shame and defiance. "Life happened," he answered simply. "Life happened to all of us." Isabella stood frozen on the sidewalk, people flowing around her like a river around a stone. The busy city noise faded into the background as she stared at Michael and his children. "These are my kids," Michael said, breaking the heavy silence. "This is Emma. She's 6, and this little guy is Sam. He's 4. The children looked up at Isabella with curious eyes, both wearing clothes that were clean, but clearly too small and worn thin. Emma, a thin girl with her father's dark curly hair, gave a small wave. Sam just buried his face in his father's side, suddenly shy. "They're beautiful," Isabella managed to say, her throat tight. 20 years ago, she had imagined having children with Michael. Now here he was with a family of his own, and not the life she had pictured for him. A moment of awkwardness hung between them, 20 years of unspoken words filling the space. "You're meeting?" Michael nodded toward her buzzing phone. "You should go. You were always busy with important things." His words carried no bitterness, just a simple statement of fact that somehow hurt worse than if he had been angry. Isabella silenced her phone without looking at it. The meeting can wait. She glanced around, feeling suddenly self-conscious about talking on the street. "There's a coffee shop around the corner. Would you all like something warm to drink?" Michael hesitated, pride battling with practicality in his eyes. Finally, he nodded. That would be nice for the kids. Getting Michael and the children to the coffee shop took time. Isabella watched as he struggled to his feet, leaning heavily on his crutch. The children helped in practice motions, suggesting this was their daily routine. Emma picked up their few belongings and stuffed them into a worn backpack, while Sam helped steady his father. Once settled at a corner table with hot chocolate for the children and coffee for the adults, Isabella could no longer delay the flood of memories. "I never thought I'd see you again," she said softly. "Not after how we left things." Michael ran a finger around the rim of his cup, his nails clean, but his hands rough and calloused. "You mean after you left for New York with that scholarship, and I stayed behind with a broken heart and half-finished songs?" The children were occupied with their hot chocolates and the cookies Isabella had ordered, paying little attention to the adults' conversation. "I thought you would follow," Isabella admitted. "You promised you would come once you finished your music program." Michael's laugh was hollow. "I did finish. Top of my class." He looked at his children with a soft expression. "But life has a way of changing our plans." Isabella's mind raced with images from their past. Michael playing piano in the university practice rooms while she studied nearby, walking hand in hand through fall leaves. His voice as he promised they would build a future together. "What happened, Michael?" she asked quietly. "How did you end up here?" Something dark passed over his face, and he took a long sip of coffee before answering. "After you left, I threw myself into music, got a good job composing for a small theater company. Met my wife, Lisa, there. She was a dancer." His voice softened at the mention of her. "We were happy. Had the kids. Everything was good until the accident." Emma looked up at the word accident, her young face suddenly serious. She reached for her father's hand in a gesture that seemed far too mature for a 6-year-old. "Daddy got hurt," she told Isabella matter-of-factly. "And then Mommy got sick and went to heaven." Isabella felt her heart break at the simple way the child described what must have been devastating losses. Michael squeezed his daughter's hand. "That's when everything changed," he said quietly. "And that's when I learned who my real friends were." The way he looked at Isabella made her wonder which category she would have fallen into if she had been there. Isabella shifted uncomfortably in her chair. The coffee shop was warm and cozy, a stark contrast to the cold sidewalk where Michael and his children had been sitting just minutes before. The silence between them grew heavy with unasked questions. "The accident," Isabella finally said. "What happened?" Michael took a deep breath, his shoulders rising and falling under his threadbare jacket. "I was driving home from a late-night performance. It was raining. The other driver ran a red light." He spoke in short, clipped sentences, as if each word cost him something. "My right leg was crushed. Had 3 surgeries. Never walked right again." Emma pushed her empty hot chocolate mug away and leaned against her father's arm. "Daddy used to dance with Mommy," she said. "I saw pictures." Michael smiled sadly and stroked his daughter's hair. "Yes, I did, sweetheart." Isabella tried to imagine Michael dancing, then tried to reconcile that image with the man sitting across from her now, his crutch leaning against the table. "I lost my job at the theater," Michael continued. "Couldn't play piano professionally anymore, not with my injuries. Lessa worked double shifts to keep us afloat. Then she started getting headaches." Sam looked up at the mention of his mother, his small face serious. He hadn't spoken a word since they sat down, but his eyes watched everything. "Brain tumor," Michael said quietly. "She was gone 8 months later." Isabella reached across the table without thinking, placing her manicured hand over Michael's rough one. "I'm so sorry, Michael. I had no idea." He didn't pull away, but he didn't return the gesture either. "How could you? You were building your empire." There was no accusation in his voice, just acceptance. "Is there family who could help?" Isabella asked, looking at the children. Michael shook his head. "Lisa's parents are elderly, living in a retirement home in Florida. Mine are both gone. We were on our own, and I did okay for a while. Had some savings, found work I could do from home, editing music for small productions. But medical bills piled up. Then the landlord sold our building to a developer. Rent tripled overnight." Isabella winced. Real estate development was her business. How many families had she displaced without a second thought? "We lived in our car for 2 months," Michael said. "Then it got towed because I couldn't pay the parking tickets. We've been on the streets for 3 weeks now. Sam suddenly spoke up, his voice small but clear. I miss my bed. Isabella felt tears prick at her eyes. She checked her phone. 5 missed calls from her assistant. The meeting had started without her, and for the first time in her career, she didn't care. Let me help, she said firmly. I have connections. I can get you temporary housing today, help you find work. No. Michael's response was quick and sharp, surprising both of them. He softened his tone when he saw the children's worried faces. I mean, I appreciate the offer, but I don't want charity. It's not charity, Isabella insisted. It's guilt. Michael finished for her. Pity. I've been on my own a long time, Isabella. I've learned that help usually comes with strings attached. Emma looked between the adults, sensing the tension. Daddy, I'm hungry, she said, breaking the moment. Isabella saw the pain flash across Michael's face, the agony of a father unable to provide for his children. She understood his pride, but she also saw 2 innocent children caught in the middle. At least let me buy you all lunch, she said. For old time's sake, no strings attached. Michael studied her face for a long moment, as if searching for something. The same eyes that had once looked at her with love now held caution and distrust. Finally, he nodded slowly. Lunch would be good, he agreed, the fight leaving his voice. Thank you. As Isabella signaled the waiter, she wondered what had happened to the optimistic young man she had once loved. And she wondered, with a creeping sense of dread, if she had played a bigger role in his downfall than she realized. The diner buzzed with lunchtime activity as Isabella watched Michael's children eagerly eat their hamburgers and fries. She had chosen this place, casual enough that Michael wouldn't feel uncomfortable, but nicer than a fast food restaurant. Emma ate neatly, taking small bites, while Sam attacked his food with the enthusiasm only a hungry 4-year-old could muster. Michael barely touched his own meal, his eyes constantly moving between his children and Isabella. You should eat, Isabella said softly. You need your strength. He nodded and took a small bite of his sandwich. Old habits, he explained. When food is scarce, you learn to let the kids eat first. Isabella felt a lump form in her throat. How had the talented, vibrant Michael she once knew ended up here? The question must have shown on her face. You're wondering how it got this bad, aren't you? He asked. She nodded, not bothering to hide her curiosity. You were so talented, Michael. Your music was beautiful. I always thought you'd be famous one day. A shadow crossed his face. I was getting there, actually. Before the accident, I had just sold a piece to a major film studio. It was going to be my big break. He wiped his mouth with a napkin. The check arrived the day after I went into surgery. What happened to the money? Isabella asked. Medical bills took most of it. Insurance wouldn't cover all the treatments I needed. He flexed his right hand unconsciously. The nerves were damaged. I can still play, but not like before. Not well enough for professional work. The unspoken truth hummed between them. In their world, being good wasn't enough. You had to be exceptional. After Lisa died, Michael continued, lowering his voice so the children wouldn't hear. Things fell apart quickly. Grief does strange things to a person. I couldn't work, couldn't sleep. The medical bills from her treatment wiped out what little savings we had left. Isabella nodded, understanding all too well how quickly life could change. And there was no one who could help? No friends? Michael's expression hardened slightly. I reached out to everyone I could think of. You'd be surprised how quickly people disappear when you have nothing to offer them. The weight of his words settled over their table. Isabella wondered if he was including her in that assessment. Would she have helped if he had reached out to her? 20 years ago, she had been focused solely on her career, determined to prove herself in a male-dominated industry. I tried to find you once, Michael said suddenly, surprising her. About 10 years ago, when things started getting bad with Lisa's illness. I thought maybe. Well, we were close once. Isabella felt her chest tighten. You did? How? I called your parents' old number. Your mother answered. Isabella froze, her coffee cup halfway to her lips. Her mother had never mentioned this call. She told me you were very busy with your new company and new fiancé, and that it would be better if I didn't disrupt your life. Michael's voice held no accusation, just a matter-of-fact retelling of events. Michael, I never knew. I never got engaged. My mother must have. Isabella stopped, realizing how hollow her excuses sounded after all this time. Sam finished his hamburger and looked up at his father. "Can I have ice cream, Daddy?" The simple question broke the tension. Michael smiled at his son, the first genuine smile Isabella had seen from him. "Not today, buddy. We've already been very lucky with this nice lunch." Before Isabella could offer to buy dessert, Emma spoke up. "Is this lady your friend from before, Daddy, like in the picture?" Michael looked startled. "What picture, sweetheart?" "The one in your special box. The lady with the red hair standing by the piano." Emma looked at Isabella curiously. "You had long hair then." Isabella touched her now short bob unconsciously. She remembered that picture, taken after Michael's first major recital. She had been so proud of him that night. "Yes," Michael admitted, his voice soft. "This is Isabella. We knew each other a long time ago." "Before the accident? Before Mommy?" Sam asked, trying to place this stranger in his father's timeline. "Before everything," Michael answered, his eyes meeting Isabella's across the table. In that moment, Isabella felt the full weight of the years between them, years that had taken them in such different directions. She had gained wealth and success, while Michael had lost everything, including the use of his body. Yet he had two beautiful children who clearly adored him, while she returned each night to an empty penthouse. Who had really lost more? After lunch, Isabella suggested they take a walk through the small park across the street. The children ran ahead to the playground, happy to have a chance to play after sitting still for so long. Michael watched them with vigilant eyes as he moved slowly alongside Isabella, his crutch making a soft thud against the paved walkway. "They seem like wonderful children," Isabella said, genuinely impressed by their good behavior despite their difficult circumstances. Michael nodded. "They're my world. Emma is so much like her mother, strong, smart. And Sam." His voice softened. "He barely remembers Lisa. He was only 2 when she died." They found a bench where Michael could rest while keeping the playground in view. Fall leaves crunched beneath their feet, golden and red against the green grass. "You never had children?" Michael asked, his eyes still on Emma as she helped Sam climb up a small slide. Isabella shook her head. "Never married either. My company became my baby, I suppose." "Montgomery Real Estate Development," Michael said. "I've seen your billboards around the city. Building tomorrow's dreams today." The way he quoted her company slogan made Isabella wonder if he found it ironic. "Michael," she began, feeling suddenly nervous, "I want to help you and your children. Not out of pity or guilt, but because—" She paused, unsure how to express what she was feeling. "Because what?" Michael's voice had an edge to it now. "Because we have history. Because I'm your good deed for the day." Isabella recoiled slightly at his tone. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" Michael turned to look at her fully. "You know what's not fair, Isabella? Life isn't fair. It wasn't fair when you left me 20 years ago with no warning, no explanation, just a note saying you needed to focus on your career." Isabella felt as if she'd been slapped. "What are you talking about? I didn't leave you without warning. We talked about it for months. My scholarship, the opportunity in New York. You were supportive." Michael laughed, a harsh sound that contained no humor. "Is that how you remember it? We never talked about breaking up. You promised we would make it work long distance. Then suddenly, you were gone." "That's not what happened," Isabella insisted, her heart pounding. "You knew I was leaving. You drove me to the airport." "I drove you to the airport thinking you were going for a summer internship that would end in August. Not that you were leaving forever." Michael's eyes flashed with old pain. 3 weeks later, I got your letter saying you weren't coming back, that a relationship would hold you back." Isabella stood up, suddenly needing to move. This wasn't how she remembered things at all. In her memory, they had agreed to separate amicably, both focused on their careers. "That doesn't make sense," she said. "Why would I? Why would you lie about it now?" "I don't know," Michael shrugged. "Maybe you've told yourself a different story all these years to ease your conscience." Emma waved from the top of the slide, and Michael waved back, forcing a smile for his daughter's benefit. "I kept your letter," he said more quietly. "For years, I kept it. Read it over and over, trying to understand what I'd done wrong." Isabella sank back onto the bench, her mind racing. Could her memory be so wrong? Or was Michael misremembering? There's something else you should know, Michael said, his voice dropping even lower. When Lisa was first diagnosed, I called your parents again. Your father answered that time. Isabella tensed. Her relationship with her parents had always been complicated. You told me you were getting married in a month. Said you were finally settling down with the right kind of man, a banker or lawyer, someone suitable. Michael's eyes searched her face. He offered me money to stay away from you. Said you'd worked too hard to have your past show up and embarrass you. Isabella felt the blood drain from her face. This sounded exactly like something her controlling father would do. He had always disapproved of Michael, a musician from a middle-class family. I never got married, she whispered. And I never knew you called. I didn't take the money, Michael added. I still had my pride then. Isabella stared at the playground without seeing it, her carefully constructed memories crumbling around her. Had she really been so cold? Had her parents interfered more than she knew? Or was Michael twisting the truth? The perfect past she had cherished suddenly felt like a lie, but whose lie, she wasn't certain. The afternoon sun began to sink lower in the sky as Isabella sat in silence, trying to process Michael's words. The children continued playing, their laughter a sharp contrast to the heavy conversation between the adults. I need to understand what really happened, Isabella finally said. This doesn't match my memories at all. Michael ran a hand through his unkempt hair. Maybe we both remember things the way we needed to. Isabella pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts. There's someone who might help us sort this out. Do you remember Jennifer Paddle? She was friends with both of us back then. Michael nodded slowly. She was your roommate. Is she still in your life? We keep in touch, Isabella said, already dialing the number. She's a doctor now, working at the university hospital. The call connected, and after brief explanations and expressions of shock from Jennifer, Isabella put the phone on speaker so they could both talk to her. Michael, is that really you? Jennifer's voice came through clearly. I can't believe Isabella found you after all these years. It's me, Michael confirmed, though not exactly in the best circumstances. Isabella got straight to the point. Jen, we need your help. Michael and I seem to have very different memories about how our relationship ended 20 years ago. I remember us agreeing to separate because of my career. He remembers me leaving suddenly with just a letter. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. This is uncomfortable, Jennifer finally said. You're both partially right, but you're both missing important pieces. Isabella and Michael exchanged puzzled glances. Isabella, you did talk about your scholarship for months, but you always insisted the relationship would continue long distance. Then something happened the week before you left. Jennifer's voice grew more cautious. Michael, do you remember the night of the West Side Music Festival? Michael's face suddenly paled. I don't remember much of that night. Exactly, Jennifer said grimly. You were drinking heavily that night, Michael. You had just learned your composition didn't win the Sherman Prize, and you were devastated. Isabella frowned, searching her memories. I remember you were upset about something. He wasn't just upset, Isabella. He was out of control, Jennifer continued. You tried to take him home, but he refused. You two had a huge fight on the street. He said terrible things about your dreams being shallow and accused you of abandoning him. Michael closed his eyes, shame washing over his features. The next morning, Jennifer went on, you came back to our apartment in tears. You said you couldn't handle his drinking anymore, that it had been getting worse for months, and you were afraid of who he became when he drank. Isabella sat very still, fragmented memories starting to surface. Michael's mood swings, empty bottles hidden in his apartment, promises to stop that were never kept. So I did write that letter, Isabella whispered. Yes, Jennifer confirmed. You decided a clean break was better. You were afraid if you had another conversation about it, he would convince you to stay, and he'd end up sacrificing your future. Michael's hands were trembling slightly. I was drinking too much back then, he admitted. But I got help after Isabella left. I joined a program, Caught Sober. Isabella turned to face him. You never mentioned drinking problems today when you talked about your past. Would you have told a story that made you look bad? Michael asked quietly. We all protect ourselves, Isabella. The children were now heading back toward the bench, tired from playing. There's one more thing you both should know, Jennifer said before they ended the call. Isabella, your mother called Michael about 6 months after you left. She told him you were engaged to someone else and that he should move on. But I wasn't engaged, Isabella protested. I know, Jennifer said. Your mother wanted to make sure he wouldn't try to contact you and derail your future, as she put it. And Michael, Jennifer continued, you should know that Isabella tried to call you a year later. Your number was disconnected. She asked me about you, but I had lost touch with you too. As the call ended, Isabella and Michael sat in stunned silence, the truth between them more complicated than either had believed. Their perfect memories had been selective, protecting them from pain and guilt. Emma ran up to them, slightly out of breath. Daddy, Sam is tired. Michael nodded, gathering himself. We should go. Go where? Isabella asked, the question carrying more weight than simple curiosity. Michael had no answer. The streetlights flickered on as evening approached. Isabella watched as Sam rubbed his eyes, clearly exhausted from the day's activities. The little boy leaned against his father's leg, while Emma stood quietly beside them, her young face showing worry beyond her years. You don't have a place to sleep tonight, do you? Isabella asked softly. Michael hesitated, his pride battling with his responsibility as a father. We've been staying at the shelter on Crawford Street, but you have to line up by 4 o'clock to get beds. We probably missed our chance today. Isabella made a decision. I have a guest apartment in my building. It's small, but clean and warm. You could stay there while you figure things out. Isabella, Michael began, his voice tight with reluctance. Not for me, she interrupted, nodding toward the children. For them. Just for tonight. No strings attached. Emma looked up at her father with hopeful eyes. A real bed, Daddy, with pillows? Michael's resistance crumbled at his daughter's words. He nodded slowly. Just for tonight. Thank you. The ride to Isabella's building was quiet. Her driver, Thomas, helped Michael with his crutch while Isabella carried a sleeping Sam. Emma walked beside them, her eyes wide as they entered the gleaming lobby with its marble floors and crystal chandelier. You live here? She whispered to Isabella. Yes, Isabella replied, but the apartment you'll be staying in is much cozier than mine. The guest apartment was on the 3rd floor, a simple one-bedroom unit that Isabella kept for visiting business associates. She watched as Michael looked around, taking in the modest but comfortable furnishings. The sofa pulls out into a bed, she explained, and there are extra blankets in the closet. Michael nodded, emotions playing across his face. This is more than generous. While Michael got the children settled, Isabella ordered groceries to be delivered, simple foods that would be easy to prepare, plus some treats for the kids. When she returned to the apartment, Emma was already asleep on the pull-out sofa, and Michael was sitting at the small dining table, looking lost in thought. Where's Sam? Isabella asked, keeping her voice low. In the bedroom, he fell asleep as soon as his head hit the pillow. Michael smiled faintly. He hasn't slept in a real bed in weeks. Isabella sat across from him, the weight of their earlier conversation still hanging between them. I'm sorry, they both said at the same time, then laughed softly at the coincidence. You go first, Isabella offered. Michael took a deep breath. I'm sorry I didn't tell you the whole truth about our past, and I'm sorry about the drinking back then. Jennifer was right. I had a problem. I got help after you left, but by then it was too late for us. And I'm sorry I didn't have the courage to talk to you face to face, Isabella replied. Writing that letter was cowardly, and I'm sorry I didn't try harder to find you when I called that time. The honesty between them felt cleansing, like rain washing away years of misunderstandings and half-truths. We were so young, Michael said, both trying to protect ourselves in different ways. Isabella nodded. And then life took us in completely different directions. Your parents, Michael said carefully. Are they still? My father passed away 5 years ago. My mother lives in Florida now. We're not close. Isabella's relationship with her parents had never recovered after she discovered how they had manipulated her life. When I learned how they interfered in my relationships, I pulled away. I'm sorry, Michael said, and she could tell he meant it. A comfortable silence fell between them. After 20 years of carrying distorted memories, the truth had finally set them both free from blame and resentment. What happens now? Michael asked eventually. With us, I mean. Isabella considered the question. The romantic love they had shared was long gone, replaced by something more complex, a connection forged through shared history and newfound honesty. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I'd like to help you get back on your feet. Not out of guilt or pity, but because—" She paused, finding the right words. "Because sometimes life gives us second chances to do the right thing." Michael reached across the table and tentatively took her hand, his touch gentle. "Maybe we both need that second chance." From the bedroom, Sam called out for his father, his voice sleepy and confused in the strange surroundings. "Go," Isabella said. "We can talk more tomorrow." As Michael limped toward the bedroom, Isabella felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The past couldn't be changed, but the future was still unwritten. And for the first time in years, she was looking forward to seeing what it might hold. 3 months passed quickly. The guest apartment that was supposed to be a one-night solution had become a temporary home for Michael and his children. Isabella had been surprised at how naturally they had fit into her life, bringing warmth and laughter to days that had once been filled with nothing but work. On a bright Sunday morning, Isabella stood in the doorway of the apartment, watching as Michael helped Emma tie her shoes. The change in him was remarkable. Clean-shaven, with a proper haircut and new clothes, he looked more like the Michael she had once known. The sadness in his eyes had faded, replaced by a quiet determination. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Isabella asked. Michael nodded, reaching for his crutch. Though he still needed it for support, his movements were stronger now. The physical therapy Isabella had arranged was making a difference. "More than ready," he replied. "The kids need their own space, and I need to stand on my own 2 feet, figuratively speaking." He smiled at his own joke, something he had started doing more often lately. The apartment they were going to see was in a modest building owned by one of Isabella's business partners. The rent was reasonable, especially with Michael's new job teaching music at a community center 3 afternoons a week. It wasn't the glamorous career he had once dreamed of, but seeing the joy on his face when he talked about his students told Isabella he had found something meaningful. "I packed lunch," Sam announced proudly, holding up a small backpack. At 4, he was eager to help with everything, and the security of regular meals had brought back his childhood energy. "Good job, buddy," Michael praised him. "We'll have a picnic in the park after we see the new place." Emma was quieter, watching Isabella with thoughtful eyes. "Will you still visit us when we move?" she asked. Isabella knelt down to the girl's level. "Of course I will. We're friends now, aren't we?" Emma nodded solemnly, then surprised Isabella with a quick hug before running to join her brother. The apartment viewing went well. It was a second-floor unit with 2 small bedrooms and a living room with enough space for the used piano Isabella had found for Michael. The building had an elevator, which would make things easier for him on bad days when his leg pained him more. As the children explored their potential new bedrooms, Michael stood by the window, looking out at the neighborhood. "I never thought I'd get back on my feet," he said as Isabella joined him. "After Lisa died, it felt like I was falling with nothing to grab onto." "You're strong," Isabella told him. "Stronger than you give yourself credit for." "I had help," he acknowledged, turning to face her. "Your help? Not just the apartment and the job connections, but," he gestured vaguely, "you helped me find myself again." Isabella felt a warmth spread through her chest. "It wasn't one-sided, you know. Having you and the kids in my life has changed me too." It was true. For years, Isabella had filled her days with meetings and business deals, measuring success in dollars and square footage. Now she found herself leaving work earlier, making time for picnics and children's movies, and simple conversations that had nothing to do with real estate. "We should head to the park for that picnic," Michael suggested as the children came running back, excited about their new rooms. Later, as they sat on a blanket under a large oak tree, Sam and Emma chasing butterflies nearby, Isabella realized something important. What she had found with Michael wasn't a rekindled romance. That young love was part of their past. What they had built instead was something equally valuable, a friendship based on honesty, forgiveness, and mutual respect. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Michael asked, noticing her contemplative expression. Isabella smiled. "I was just thinking about second chances, how they rarely look the way we expect them to." "True," Michael agreed. "If someone had told me a year ago that losing everything would somehow lead to gaining so much, I would never have believed them." As the afternoon sun filtered through the leaves above them, Isabella watched Emma teaching her little brother how to make a daisy chain. The future stretched before them, no longer shadowed by misunderstandings or regrets. Sometimes, Isabella thought, the most beautiful stories aren't about recapturing what was lost, but about discovering something new and unexpected, something that could only exist because of the journey taken to find it.